It was just after dinner when she said it, her voice soft, almost like a whisper, as she stood in the kitchen doorway with those wide, searching eyes. Asterisk, I trust you more than anyone. Asterisk, I froze. In any other situation, maybe those words would have warmed a parent's heart. But coming from my stepdaughter in that moment, they sent a chill straight through me. She was only 14, still trying to find her place in a world that had already let her down too many times. Her mother, my wife, had been gone for almost a year now, a car accident that changed everything in a blink. Since then, it had just been the two of us in this quiet, echoing house filled with memories that neither of us knew what to do with. I tried my best to be there for her, to keep the routine steady, to offer the kind of support she could lean on. But trust? Real trust? I wasn't sure either of us truly knew what that looked like anymore. She had always been guarded, smart, quiet, observant beyond her years. Not one to open up easily, not even to her own mother when she was alive. So when she said those words, I knew something was off. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. There was a tremble in her voice, a shadow behind her eyes, like she was holding on to something much heavier than she should have been carrying. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just a moment of vulnerability. Maybe she just needed to say it out loud to believe it herself. But that night, as I lay awake listening to the creaks in the hallway and the wind brushing against the windows, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Very wrong. Over the next few days, I started noticing little things. The way she jumped when her phone buzzed. How she double-checked the locks on her bedroom door. The quiet glances she'd throw behind her, like she was afraid someone was following her. And then there was the journal, left open on the living room couch, pages fluttering like they wanted to be read. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. And what I saw made my heart drop. That trust she gave me? It wasn't just a compliment. It was a lifeline. A silent plea for help. I didn't know what scared me more, that she was hiding something from someone outside the house, or that she was hiding it from me. And then one evening, just as I was about to ask her directly what was going on, she beat me to it. She looked at me with a mix of fear and desperation and said, Asterisk, promise me, no matter what I tell you, you won't be mad. Asterisk, I nodded. She took a deep breath. And then the truth started to come out. But that's where everything really began to fall apart. She hesitated before speaking, eyes flickering to the window as if checking to make sure no one else could hear. There's something I haven't told you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve, a nervous habit I'd noticed lately. I waited, not wanting to rush her. Whatever it was weighing on her. You could see it in the way she carried herself, shoulders hunched, always looking down like she was trying to disappear. I think someone's watching me, she finally said. I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean? Not all the time, she said quickly, as if trying to make it sound less serious than it was. Just sometimes. After school. Or when I'm walking home from the bus stop. I keep seeing the same car. And the same guy. He never says anything. Just sits there. But it's always the same spot. Same time. And I don't think it's a coincidence. My mind raced. Why hadn't she told me sooner? I tried to stay calm, but my thoughts were spiraling. Was it someone she knew? Someone from school? Someone from before? Have you told anyone else? I asked. She shook her head. No. I didn't know if it was just in my head. And I didn't want to make you worry. But it's been getting worse. Last week, I thought he followed me. I clenched my jaw. Why didn't you call me? I didn't want you to think I was being dramatic, she said, her voice cracking a little. And honestly, I wasn't sure you'd believe me. That hit harder than I expected. I tried so hard to be someone she could trust, someone she could feel safe with. And yet she'd been carrying this alone. I asked her to describe the man. She gave a vague description, middle-aged, wearing a cap, sometimes sunglasses. The car was a dark sedan, maybe gray or black with tinted windows. Nothing specific enough to track, but just enough to keep me up at night. I started thinking back. Had I seen anything strange? Any unfamiliar cars on our street? Any strangers hanging around the school? Nothing came to mind. But then again, I hadn't been looking. That night, I sat by the front window after she went to bed, watching the street, waiting for anything out of the ordinary. My mind kept returning to that journal. I hadn't read much, just a few lines, but there had been something about a secret. Something she couldn't write plainly, like she was afraid even the paper wasn't safe. And there was something else I couldn't ignore, my wife. Before the accident, she'd been distant, preoccupied. Like she was carrying a secret too. Was it connected? Could this have started before she died? The questions kept piling up. The pieces didn't fit yet, but I could feel something moving underneath all of this. Something hidden. And I was starting to think that the most terrifying part wasn't the man in the car. It was what my stepdaughter wasn't telling me. The next morning felt heavier than usual. My stepdaughter sat quietly at the table, pushing her cereal around with her spoon instead of eating. I didn't press her. Something told me she was still processing everything she'd shared the night before. I was too. That strange man. The car. The fear in her voice. It wasn't just paranoia. It was something real. And that meant we had a problem, one I couldn't ignore. After dropping her off at school, I circled the block twice, checking for the car she described. Nothing. Just regular commuters, school buses, and a few parked vehicles that didn't match her description. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I called the school to quietly ask if there had been any reports of someone suspicious lurking nearby. The receptionist hesitated before telling me. There was something mentioned last week, but no one got a clear look. That was enough to make my stomach drop. Back home, I found myself drawn back to her journal. I didn't want to invade her privacy again, but I was desperate for answers. I needed to understand what she was up against, what we were up against. I flipped through the pages slowly this time, scanning her careful handwriting. Most of it was what you'd expect from a teenager, random thoughts, poems, memories, but a few entries stood out. One mentioned a woman named Claire. Another one said, asterisk, he said not to tell. But I think Mom knew. Asterisk, who was he? And why did she think her mother had known about it? That one line changed everything. It made me wonder if my wife's accident wasn't just an accident. She had been distracted the weeks before it happened, making late-night phone calls, deleting messages, glancing over her shoulder like she was expecting someone. I hadn't thought much of it then. Grief does strange things to the memory, but now it all felt connected. I started asking around quietly, reached out to one of my wife's old friends, someone she used to work with. We hadn't spoken in months, but she agreed to meet for coffee. I kept the conversation light at first, but when I brought up my wife's last few weeks, her expression changed. She hesitated, then said, there was someone from her past she didn't want to talk about. A man. She said he'd come back. I pressed her for more, but she just shook her head. I told her to go to the police. I don't know if she ever did. I left that conversation with more questions than answers. Back home, I noticed something odd. My stepdaughter's bedroom window was open, even though it had rained that morning. When I asked her about it later, she went pale and said she hadn't touched it. That night, I sat in the living room again, lights off, phone in hand, just watching. Waiting. Because something was definitely coming. And the more I tried to protect her, the more it felt like we were already in too deep. The next morning felt heavier than usual. My stepdaughter sat quietly at the table, pushing her cereal around with her spoon instead of eating. I didn't press her. Something told me she was still processing everything she'd shared the night before. I was too. That strange man. The car. The fear in her voice. It wasn't just paranoia. It was something real. And that meant we had a problem, one I couldn't ignore. After dropping her off at school, I circled the block twice, checking for the car she described. Nothing. Just regular commuters, school buses, and a few parked vehicles that didn't match her description. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I called the school to quietly ask if there had been any reports of someone suspicious lurking nearby. The receptionist hesitated before telling me. There was something mentioned last week, but no one got a clear look. That was enough to make my stomach drop. Back home, I found myself drawn back to her journal. I didn't want to invade her privacy again, but I was desperate for answers. I needed to understand what she was up against, what we were up against. I flipped through the pages slowly this time, scanning her careful handwriting. Most of it was what you'd expect from a teenager, random thoughts, poems, memories, but a few entries stood out. One mentioned a woman named Claire. Another one said, asterisk, he said not to tell. But I think Mom knew. Asterisk, who was he? And why did she think her mother had known about it? That one line changed everything. It made me wonder if my wife's accident wasn't just an accident. She had been distracted the weeks before it happened, making late-night phone calls, deleting messages, glancing over her shoulder like she was expecting someone. I hadn't thought much of it then. Grief does strange things to the memory, but now it all felt connected. I started asking around quietly, reached out to one of my wife's old friends, someone she used to work with. We hadn't spoken in months, but she agreed to meet for coffee. I kept the conversation light at first, but when I brought up my wife's last few weeks, her expression changed. She hesitated, then said, there was someone from her past she didn't want to talk about. A man. She said he'd come back. I pressed her for more, but she just shook her head. I told her to go to the police. I don't know if she ever did. I left that conversation with more questions than answers. Back home, I noticed something odd. My stepdaughter's bedroom window was open, even though it had rained that morning. When I asked her about it later, she went pale and said she hadn't touched it. That night, I sat in the living room again, lights off, phone in hand, just watching. Waiting. Because something was definitely coming. And the more I tried to protect her, the more it felt like we were already in too deep. The wind howled outside as another storm rolled in. The kind that seemed to soak into your bones and sit there. Inside the house, everything was quiet, too quiet. My stepdaughter was upstairs, supposedly doing homework, but I knew she was just as on edge as I was. The tension between us hung in the air like static. She had stopped asking questions and started watching me the way I had been watching her. Carefully, cautiously, like we were both waiting for something neither of us could name. The strange car hadn't shown up again, at least not that I could see. But the feeling of being watched hadn't left. If anything, it had grown worse. There were small signs. The gate left unlatched in the morning, even though I always locked it at night. A light flickering in the hallway that hadn't flickered before. And yesterday, when I took out the trash, I found cigarette butts under the tree at the edge of the yard. Fresh ones. I didn't smoke. She didn't either. Then late one evening I saw it. I had gone out back to double-check the doors when I noticed movement by the fence. A flash of a coat disappearing into the shadows. I ran out without thinking, barefoot on the cold ground, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. But whoever it was, they were fast, and gone before I could get close. I didn't tell her about it. Not yet. She was already anxious, jumpy. I didn't want to make it worse. But I started keeping a bat next to the bed, and I double-checked the locks every hour like it would actually stop whatever this was. The next day at work, I finally gave in and called a private investigator. I didn't know who else to turn to. I didn't want to go to the police yet, not without something solid. The PI listened, took notes, asked about my wife's past, the man from the journal, the strange car. He promised to look into it. That evening, I came home to find my stepdaughter waiting in the hallway. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She held up her phone, hands trembling. He texted me. My stomach dropped. Who? I don't know. There's no name. No picture. Just this. She handed me the phone. On the screen was a message that read, Asterisk, your mom kept secrets. You shouldn't. Tell him the truth. Asterisk, I stared at the words, pulse racing. Did you reply? She shook her head.
No.
But I think I know who it is. I wanted to ask more. But then there was a loud knock at the front door, sharp, sudden, like someone wasn't just asking to come in but demanding it. We both froze. I looked at her. She looked at me. The knock came again, louder this time. And then she whispered, That's him. The air felt like it stopped moving. My hand tightened around the bat at my side. Everything we'd been running from had just found its way to our front door. I stepped toward the door slowly, heart hammering against my ribs. My stepdaughter gripped my sleeve, whispering, Don't open it. Her voice trembled. But there was something else in it too, certainty. She knew who was out there. I looked through the peephole, but whoever it was had their head down, hoodie pulled low, face turned slightly away. They stood still, just breathing heavily, like they were waiting for me to make the first move. Then came a voice, low, muffled through the door. We need to talk. Before it's too late. I didn't open it. I called out instead. Who are you? What do you want? No answer. Just silence. I waited a few more seconds, then heard footsteps retreating, calm, unhurried. I watched from the window as the figure walked back to the street and climbed into a dark gray sedan. The same one. It idled for a moment, then slowly pulled away. I locked the door and turned to her. Tell me everything. Now. She sat down on the edge of the couch, eyes glued to the floor. It started before Mom died, she said quietly. She used to get these phone calls at night. I listened once. She was scared. She said something about a deal. And someone coming back. I think she owed him something. What kind of deal? She hesitated. I don't know exactly. But I think it had to do with money. Or maybe something else. She used to cry when she thought I was asleep. I sat across from her trying to process it all. A secret deal. A man threatening her. And now he was after her daughter. But why you? I asked. Why now? Because I found something. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were old photographs of my wife years ago with a man I didn't recognize. In some of the pictures they looked close. Too close. One photo had writing on the back, asterisk, we're even now. No more lies. Asterisk, it was dated just a few months before her death. I stared at it, questions crashing into each other in my mind. Who was this man? Was he the one outside? And what did no more lies mean? But then the real twist came. She pulled out one last photo, this one of me standing in our front yard. It was taken from a distance through trees. I was holding a box of groceries looking toward the house. This came in the mail, she said. No return address. No note. Just the photo. Now I was the one frozen. The man wasn't just watching her. He was watching us. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about the past anymore. It wasn't even just about her mother. Someone out there was trying to send a message, and it was getting louder with every move we made. I had no idea what he wanted, but one thing was clear now. He wasn't going to stop until he got it. That night, neither of us slept. The photo of me in the yard sat on the table like a threat we couldn't look away from. My stepdaughter clutched her phone while I kept one eye on the front window, waiting for any sign of that car. I called the private investigator again and told him everything, the man, the pictures, the messages. He promised he'd dig deeper and meet us first thing in the morning. But we didn't make it to morning. Around 3 a.m. we heard it. The crunch of gravel outside. A door shutting softly. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving up the driveway. I motioned for her to stay quiet as I grabbed the bat again. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it echoed in the walls. Then came the knock. 3 steady pounds against the door. And then a voice. I told you. No more lies. It was him. Before I could respond, the back door burst open. Kicked in with force. He hadn't come alone. I ran toward the noise, barely catching a glimpse of the man who'd haunted our days. He was older than I expected, but his presence filled the room. Cold eyes, calm face, like he'd been here before. My stepdaughter screamed and instinct took over. I charged, swung the bat, but another figure appeared, tall, masked, blocking my swing. They shoved me hard into the wall. My head hit the corner of a shelf, and everything spun for a second. "Stop," she cried. "Please, he doesn't know anything." The man raised a hand to silence her. "You should have told him. Now he'll find out the hard way." "What are you talking about?" I gasped, struggling to sit up. He stepped closer and looked me in the eye. "Your wife made a deal with me years ago. She needed money, protection, something to hide from someone even worse. In exchange, she gave me something valuable." I was shaking. "What did she give you?" He looked toward my stepdaughter. Her. My stomach turned. She backed away, tears streaming down her face. "She never meant to go through with it," the man said. "But when she tried to run, things got messy." The pieces clicked. The accident. The quiet calls. The fear in her eyes. My wife hadn't just been running from her past. She'd been running from him. "But I'm not her," my stepdaughter said, voice cracking but strong. "You don't own me." That's when the front door crashed open. Police flooded in, lights flashing. My phone. I had called the PI earlier and left the line open. He'd tracked the location and sent help. The masked man bolted. The other tried to fight, but within seconds, they were both restrained. It was over. Or so we thought. Later, as the house finally quieted and dawn broke through the window, I found one last photo slipped under the door. A recent one, me and my stepdaughter hugging by the car. Written on the back in messy ink. Asterisk, "You saved her this time. But we never forget a broken deal." Asterisk, and just like that, peace turned to a warning. The past wasn't done with us yet. The house felt different in the daylight. Quieter, safer, like the worst of the storm had passed. But the message on the back of that last photo lingered in my mind like a cold breath down my neck. We never forget a broken deal. Even with the men in custody, even after all the noise had faded, we both knew the threat wasn't gone for good. Still, for the first time in weeks, there was space to breathe. My stepdaughter sat beside me on the front steps, wrapped in a blanket, her hair still damp from the shower. She looked tired but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted, even if only partly. I could see the questions behind her eyes, the ones I had too. Who else knew? Was there more to the story? Could the past really stay buried? Over the next few days, we started putting pieces back together. The private investigator helped confirm more about the man. His real name, his history, his connections to others who'd been caught in similar deals. It turned out my wife had once worked with him years ago, during a time in her life she'd kept hidden from both of us. She had borrowed money, asked for favors, tried to walk away. But with people like that, debts didn't vanish. They waited in the dark, passed down like a curse. What haunted me most was the thought that she had spent her last year alive trying to protect her daughter from that curse. Maybe she hadn't told me because she thought she could fix it. Maybe she had hoped it would die with her. But secrets have a way of surfacing. And this one nearly swallowed us whole. We had the locks changed. Security cameras installed. I kept the police in the loop, and the private investigator stayed close. For the first time, my stepdaughter started to talk about things, about her mom, about the fear she'd buried for so long, and even about the guilt she'd carried, thinking maybe somehow this was all her fault. I made sure she knew it wasn't. None of it was. She had just been a child caught in the middle of something far too dark. School slowly resumed. I started working remotely more often, always keeping an eye on things. But our connection changed. Stronger now. Deeper. That moment when she said, "I trust you more than anyone," made sense in a new way. She wasn't just looking for comfort. She was trying to survive. And I finally understood what scared me so much about her trust. It wasn't the responsibility. It was the fear of not being enough to protect her when it really mattered. But I had tried. I had protected her. And in doing so, I'd proven something to both of us. Now, when I look at her, I don't see a scared girl hiding behind secrets. I see someone brave, someone healing. The past still whispers, but it no longer controls our lives. And as for that final message, they may never forget a broken deal, but neither will we forget how far we've come. Because in the end, trust didn't break us. It saved us.